Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, July 3rd, 2020. Time for yet another show, and just before a holiday weekend at that. A lot of people noticing that the ordinarily expected morning post on the front page of Daily Kos didn't run this morning. The holiday weekends tend to make things wonky around the running of the queue. Of course, what you don't know is that I very often will post those things ahead of time to a background queue that where stories will wait until it's time to publish them, and under normal circumstances we have a semi well established, or at least well understood arrangement whereby I will post those things anywhere from 11 p.m. to sometimes 1 in the morning before the thing shows up. And that's usually fine, because the people who are ordinarily running the queue over at Daily Kos are, like the rest of us, sleepless drones. We stay awake around the clock, and we're awake when something gets queued at 1 a.m., and you can put it in place for 7 a.m. But around holiday weekends where people take time off, much deserved, of course, and others step into the role, or, sometimes things just slip around those holiday weekends. And, lots of things, often for holiday weekends, lots of people will post their stories for use during the long weekend ahead of time, so that there's a lot less scrambling going on during a holiday weekend. And then a story like that will get lost in the shuffle, gets posted after somebody who's running the queue for the morning finally gives up and goes to sleep, etc. No emergency. We're here. And, of course, our own alert to everyone that gets posted on the Daily Kos radio page and the diaries is there, so you'll be able to find the thing. And if you've found your way to the show, congratulations. It's time for us to update you on all of the various calamities befalling us as we head into our glorious Independence Day. United Kingdom thanking their lucky stars that they're not responsible for us this time around. I think most of the world ready to write off American leadership and, as it turns out, participation in the world order. I don't know whether it's hit everybody yet, but I don't know whether the president will ever take notice of it, and he'll certainly just blame others for it. But yes, as expected, Americans more or less being excluded from newly redefined or redesigned travel restrictions around most of the world, where people are opening up their borders again for international travel and taking an objective look at how people are handling the coronavirus. And there's simply no denying that the United States has let the thing run rampant and has not got it anywhere near under control. And so we're topping the lists of countries whose travelers will not be permitted back in, and in particular, of course, over in the European Union. I suppose the UK gets to make its own rules, but don't forget that they'll be likely remembering that we tried excluding them at some point, except if you were Nigel Farage, you're allowed to come in. All right, so we'll be embarrassing ourselves in front of the world shortly, and it'll probably start to hit with American travelers. There are probably still people who have tickets and are ready to go and don't realize the number of destinations that are going to require them to quarantine for 2 weeks when they get there. Vacations will be ruined. And ordinarily that's enough to catalyze positive change, but we don't have a president capable of making that. So, hope you enjoy your summer vacation in an airport hotel, wherever you thought you were going. Happened to see this one as I was getting ready for the air. Josh Marshall tweeting this around. And apparently he wants you to see it. And you can tell usually when people really want you to see something when they write this, or in this case, this, at the start of their own tweet, and then include this important tweet for you to see. We'll give away the store on this by just reading what Josh has to say about Carl Quintanilla's post here. Josh says, does he Does he anglicize Quinta? Does he say Quintanilla? I'm not really sure, but we're going to give him the how do we say it? The Spanish pronunciation anyway. It would be, I guess, Quintanilla, but I don't know. I don't know, Carl. I guess we'll find out. He's NBC News correspondent, I guess, according to the bio here. I'll take his word for it. He's got a blue check mark and everything. But Josh says, this. Highest correlation to increased spread, and we are talking about the coronavirus here. The highest correlation to increased spread is, this is great, credit card transactions from in-person restaurant eating. And yes, I would have gone with in-person restaurant dining on that one just because it sounds fancier. And also, it's not entirely clear that they're not using their credit card to pay for eating people inside restaurants when it's written that way. But I think we all assume as much. What does Carl have to say? Carl, I guess, is quoting J.P. Morgan. And as long as you have J.P. Morgan on the line, ask her why she gonged this contestant. I've been dying to find that out, and I never really did get an answer to that, and she was never pressed on it. But anyway, J.P. Morgan, but the financial one, says, we find a positive correlation between levels of credit card activity 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks, and the spread of COVID-19 since then. What do you know? There's some great data scientists working on this thing. Because, well, I guess you should expect that. I mean, really, honestly, that's all epidemiologists do is, at bottom, data science. Well, don't all scientists really just rely on data and they just have different ways of interpreting it? Okay, that aside. Credit card activity 3 weeks ago and the spread of COVID-19. Positive correlation. We don't know how strong. But anyway, well, Josh says it's the highest correlation. But again, we don't know how strong. Of all indicators, the highest correlation is the level of card present. Essentially, that would be in-person restaurant spending. That's interesting that they can differentiate. I mean, makes sense, but it's interesting that they do and can differentiate between in-person, or what do they call it, card-present restaurant spending versus, I guess, remote, or, restaurant spending. Call in, give them your credit card number, and you're a pickup customer. Let's take a look at this chart they have here. Yeah, plotting change in new COVID-19 cases per million in population versus, at least Chase card present. Were they only measuring like Chase bank cards or something? That's what it says. It's Chase card present restaurant spending 3 weeks ago. So, very interesting. And looks like the big locations for all of this out on the far right of the chart would be, well, I guess the furthest out right in terms of credit card spending was, surprisingly enough, I guess, Louisiana. Very closely mirrored on their position on the x-axis by Arizona, West Virginia, and Oklahoma. I don't know if I would have picked West Virginia out of that hat. On the vertical axis, that is the change in new COVID-19 cases per million population, the highest marks here. Look at this. So what is this? Change in, I guess, is this the number? It doesn't say how it's expressed. But Arizona, far and away, the leader of that pack, followed by Florida, and then Nevada, and very close on their heels, South Carolina. But Arizona occupies pretty much the golden spot here, very nearly the highest in additional restaurant spending, and far and away the highest in new COVID-19 cases per million population. So very interesting. Source here, Johns Hopkins and J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan probably gonged Johns Hopkins because there's an extra S in his name. What are you doing, Johns Hopkins? That's crazy. You're just confusing people. All right. We'll add that to the roundup. There's lots more to share. I don't know if you noticed how many stories there were in the news today, if you took a look at it. Right. Okay. Let's see. Oh, look at this. Okay. Mighty OCD reminding us that there's more than one way to pick up on our morning notices to you that Daily Coast Radio will be live and on the air. He saw his notice through the RSS feed this morning. That probably would have been my 8:45 dispatch on the Daily Coast Radio page, because the one on the front page just flat didn't run. All right. Well, we have that straightened out. That's other piece of important news to share with you. Oh, yes, and we were alerted by, let's open up here, Dem Sign. That's SIGN sign, as my pre-calculus teacher used to say all the time. You have to check yourself, of course, when you're talking about that in pre-calc class. You always used to say things like that. And so make sure that you check the SIGN sign in front of one of these things, because you don't want to mistake it for the SINE sign. Oh, those homonyms. They'll drive you crazy. John Stafford is Dem Sign on Twitter, saying, looks like history has finally caught up with the breadsticks. And it's true. You know it's true because it's reported by ESPN.com. They're a sports network, as it turns out. And it turns out that the pressure that's going to change, possibly, the minds of the ownership of the Washington football franchise, known here as the Breadsticks, is going to be financial. But they've got some additional leverage, these people putting on the financial pressure. It is FedEx, who's a major sponsor, in that they own the stadium naming rights for the arena in which the Breadsticks usually play when their seasons aren't suspended by global pandemics that we just can't seem to get a hold of, control of. But the stadium sponsor, FedEx, has asked the Breadsticks to change the team nickname, and FedEx has some unique leverage in this. Not only the naming rights to the stadium, although I suppose if the ownership of the club were determined to hold on to the name against all odds, they could possibly at this point say, well, we'll forego the ordinary revenue, return to you the balance due, I guess. It's not really due, but we'll return the balance of your investment back and find a new sponsor for our stadium. FedEx's deal is apparently a $205 million deal that they struck in 1988, and it runs through 2025. So there's 5 years or less left on the deal, and I suppose that the Breadsticks management could return some amount of money and they could go shop it around for a new sponsor. They might find one, but they might not. This is actually a fantastic opportunity for Dan Snyder, who, what do I care what Dan Snyder does? Just let him keep losing as far as I'm concerned. But fantastic opportunity for him, and I guess the decision rests chiefly with him, right? He's the majority owner of the club, and I have always assumed that the decision rested chiefly with him. And he's wanted to hold on to it for vague reasons of tradition and unwillingness to, understand the inherent racist nature of the name. But anyway, he may have his mind changed finally, not only because there's money on the table, and that's the sort of thing that usually changes his mind, I think, but also because of the general political atmosphere. I was hoping that they would get around to this, and a lot of people were, once it became widely, I don't want to put this label on it because I don't want to dismiss what may be going on underneath, but probably not very many of you would object if I said that it became fashionable for brands, anyway, corporate brands, to jump on that bandwagon that we were discussing the other day, and to be a part of this and to make outward shows of sensitivity, which may or may not be genuine. I don't know, and to some extent it doesn't matter. Change will take it however it comes, and if you make it as easy as by indicating to us that money will do the talking, well then we'll gather the money and then we'll get our way. So fantastic. But it may be genuine, it may not be. But FedEx, of course, with their name on the field at this point, big enough corporation and smart enough in the PR department to know that it would be unwise to go forward out of this new sensitivity to racial issues or a renewed dedication to focusing on them anyway, thanks to the Black Lives Matter renewal of their uprising against police brutality. But I'm glad that they have broadened this beyond Black Lives Mattering and, ironically, inching closer, but in compromise, perhaps. No, you can point to it and say, look, we're reaching out towards you. Why won't you? All lives matter. People reach out toward us. Well, that's not necessarily the intent, but you get the idea. Obviously, with race and institutional racism on everybody's mind, I'm glad that they broadened it to cover the breadsticks unique problem. That's not unique, of course. There are a number of other team names that could probably use some thought as well. But anyway, it's a great opportunity for them to do it. The team leadership has resisted it for a long time. And here is an opportunity for them to, yes, give in to pressure, but not be alone in doing it. It's not like they've been singled out in some way. And they never really were singled out because, people are upset with all sorts of team nicknames. But they always felt like there was some unique pressure on them. But there's so much activity and renaming and rethinking and rebranding going on out there that they might be able to say, look, we're going to ride the wave here and take this opportunity to do it. If that doesn't convince them, then perhaps the money will. $205 million on the table. And in addition to which, the chairman and CEO of FedEx, Fred Smith, also, he's got some additional leverage, owns a minority stake in the team, which stands to reason. That's probably why FedEx was determined to go ahead with the naming rights deal. Or maybe it came with the naming rights deal, for all I know. But at any rate, that gives him some additional leverage. He'll be he is a minority stakeholder in the team, and Snyder will have to pay him some mind. So this is good. And ESPN reports, yes, Snyder has been under renewed pressure to change the nickname. And also, in addition, over and above the naming rights deal, Nike and Pepsi, both apparently under some pressure to end their relationships with the team unless the team changes its nickname. So, this may bring things together and make it possible. I don't know exactly what deals they have. Nike probably, pays for some sponsorship and provides team uniforms. I noticed another story yesterday that also went by on Twitter right about the same time I was looking at this thing, that Nike had removed all Washington's franchises merchandise from their website. So there won't be any more revenue for the Breadsticks organization through sales of Nike made Breadsticks branded gear. And again, money talks with Dan Snyder. Pepsi, I don't know what their relationship is. Maybe they cut them a deal and provide all the soft drinks at the concession stands in the stadium. I don't know exactly what they have to do, but seems like a big deal. So very interesting, and I'm glad that has a chance of finally working at some point. I don't know what they're thinking of moving to, but whatever it is, I mean, I nominate Breadsticks. I just think that's fun. But it's not very tough sounding, although, Breadsticks are unlimited at Olive Garden. Maybe Olive Garden would like to get in on the deal and be a partial sponsor of the team. And, like I said, it doesn't sound tough, but they are unlimited in both in supply and potential, you see. I don't know if they're really going to go for that, though. It would be a unique win for the show if they would do that. And I understand Dan Snyder has never heard of us, so that would be fantastic if, whatever. Anyway, let's see. Other things that we will share with you. This seems like a fun one. Plus, it's next in Pocket. Gabriel Sherman is the writer of it over at Vanity Fair, and we love Gabriel Sherman insofar as we enjoy reading his stories and don't really know anything about him, but I'm sure he's a fine person. What do I do? What do I do? That's enclosed in quotes. Who says it? Trump says it. Trump, desperate, despondent as numbers crater, loser label looms. Got to be careful with that tongue twister. That's the headline on Gabriel Sherman's new piece at Vanity Fair. Subheader has this pull quote: "They probably won't have the Jacksonville convention." How do you like that? That is one of the bigger ironies of what's happened across the South with the coronavirus. Of course, they had it planned for, what was it? Was it for Charlottesville? Or Charlotte, rather. Charlotte, North Carolina. Not Charlottesville, Virginia, but Charlottesville. Charlotte, North Carolina. And then they decided against it in a fit of pique against the mask-wearing requirement that would be in place thanks to, a relatively level-headed Democratic governor of North Carolina, would make you wear masks inside at the convention. And Republicans, because masks are stupid and we hate them, said, we're going to move our convention. Well, Donald Trump ordered them, essentially, to move their convention, and they went along with it because he's supposed to be the leader of the party. So they decided on Jacksonville, Florida, and then, as Greg warned us would be the case, the virus won out. The virus dictated terms to the governors of the various states. Now, Florida's governor hasn't come around quite yet, but as I understand it, Jacksonville, having its own localized problems with COVID-19, warned that, yes, now that we see that we're all getting coronavirus after all, because science is real, we too will likely require masks if we even allow this thing to go forward at all. We'll read a little bit about what might be happening there. We'll get a hint at that from Gabriel Sherman's piece. But I mean, that's hilarious that they fled Charlotte because of the masks, and where they landed, they figured we'll never be required to wear masks there. And shortly thereafter, they said, yeah, we're all actually kind of catching coronavirus. You'll have to wear masks if you come here. And I guess in the ultimate irony of it all, if they got mad about it and didn't have the convention in Jacksonville, and then the president, like yesterday or the day before, and so many other Republicans are now coming around to the idea that mask wearing really isn't all that bad after all, and maybe we should be doing it, and everybody should be doing it. And to have gone through the logistical nightmare of trying to move the convention only to find out, one, that you will have to wear masks, and two, that all the work that you did to try to scramble to change things so that you wouldn't have to bruise the ego of the guy who said masks are no good, now says, man, maybe masks are okay. Must be impossible to work there at this stage. Anyway, they probably won't have the Jacksonville convention. The Joni Ernst campaign is angry at Trump's horrible numbers because she has to run with him on the ticket. Meadows and Kushner are at loggerheads over Pascal, who also sucks. That part I added myself. And if things don't turn around by Labor Day, GOP defections may begin. Yeah, that's another of the fun features of the day. The admonition from Republicans who are going to have to run on the same ticket, saying, hey, if you don't get your act together and turn this stuff around by Labor Day, we might have to replace you with somebody who would be more amenable to helping us get reelected. Let's start in on this before we take our first break. With Donald Trump's approval sinking to Jimmy Carter levels, and poor Jimmy, he's doing much better now, of course, but okay. And levels of coronavirus cases spiking across the country, Trump is reluctantly waking up to the grim reality that, if the current situation holds, his reelection is gone. I hope. Republicans that have spoken with Trump in recent days describe him as a complete moron, and we can never really understand how he's president in the first place. Plus, he paints himself orange. You've gone off the rails again. They describe him as depressed and down in the dumps, where he belongs. People around him think his heart's not in it. It's never been, and we're not even sure there is one. That, according to a Republican close to the White House, torn between the imperative to win suburban voters and his instincts to play to his base, Trump has complained to people that he's in a political box with no obvious way out. According to the Republicans, Trump called Tucker Carlson late last week and said, "What do I do? What do I do?" Which may or may not have been the fuel behind the brief freak out yesterday, suggesting somewhere from some quarters that Tucker Carlson be the nominee for president, at least in 2024, should Trump lose, or maybe even right now. in case they need to replace him. I don't know why they would land on that guy, but separate story. To console himself, Trump still has moments of magical thinking. He says the polls are all fake. A Republican in touch with Trump told me, and if you're in touch with Trump, you're therefore out of touch with the rest of reality. But the bad news keeps coming. This week, Jacksonville, Florida, where Trump moved the Republican National Convention so he could hold a 15,000-person rally next month, mandated that people wear masks indoors to slow the explosion of COVID-19 cases. According to a Republican working on the convention, the campaign is now preparing to cancel the event so that Trump doesn't suffer another Tulsa-like humiliation. At least so this would be the rally or the whole convention. I don't know. They probably won't have it, the source says. It's not going to be the soft landing Trump wanted. Neither the Trump campaign nor the White House responded to requests for comment. Trump remains furious at his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, for, I think, supplanting him in what I probably planned for, for Ivanka's future. I think he saw himself in this role somehow. But at any rate, he's furious at son-in-law Jared Kushner, who he blames for the campaign's dismal poll numbers. Can't blame himself, of course. Axios reported this week that Trump complained privately that Kushner's advice on criminal justice reform damaged Trump politically. That's, I think, fairly widely acknowledged as the only positive accomplishment, certainly of Trump and probably also of Kushner's as well. That's been a bragging point for a long, long time. So now he thinks that has damaged him politically. But because Kushner is family, sources say it's unlikely that Trump will formally strip him of authority. Probably true. All right, we'll continue on with this story, which I don't think is all that long. We can get to the rest of it on the other side of the break, just not on this side. And then move on, make our way through Pocket, and see if we can give ourselves something to clasp onto for the weekend. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. We will continue on with reading Gabriel Sherman's latest in Vanity Fair. Just to remind you where we were, Trump mad now at Kushner, blaming him for his dive in the polls and asserting that his criminal justice reform advice, of all things, was what damaged Trump politically. Seems like that's not actually really it, but that because Kushner is considered to be family, not just a usurper, sources say it's unlikely Trump will formally strip him of his authority. Kushner's vast sway over West Wing decisions has become a flashpoint between him and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who probably thought he might be the chief of staff when he took this job. But you're an idiot if you believe that to be the case. The two have been engaged in a cold war over control of the campaign. Meadows pushed Trump to replace campaign manager Brad Parscale, a Kushner ally. The Republican close to the White House said Kushner wasn't happy that Meadows is close with Kushner's adversaries, Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie. Meadows is in real, and they're going to use a naughty word here. It's the S word. He's in real S. He's in real crap. Deep doo-doo. Who said that? Was that George H.W. Bush do that? Or am I confusing that with voodoo economics? Just anything that rhymes, basically, I think comes from him. Meadows is in real crap. He went to war with Jared and tried to get Brad out. The Republican briefed on the internal debate told me. Who gets briefed on this stuff? A couple weeks ago, Meadows unloaded about Kushner over dinner with his predecessor, Mick Mulvaney. Oh, boy. At Sette Osteria. I don't know if I pronounced that incorrectly. It's a fancy-sounding restaurant near the White House. All Mark did was complain how much operational control Jared has and how it leaves very little space for the chief of staff, said a Republican, again, briefed on the conversation. Mark whined to Mick, "Why didn't you warn me before I accepted the job? There's nothing for me to do." And Mulvaney probably enjoying that immensely, actually. But you really didn't have to know very much about the White House, how it functions under Trump, to know that was going to be the case. I think he could have figured that out. But like everybody else who takes jobs there, he's very dumb and his soul is being crushed. Boo-hoo. Nervous Republicans worried about losing the Senate are now debating whether to break from Trump. Trump campaign internal polls show Trump's level of strong support dropping from 21 to 17 points since last week. A person, again, briefed on the numbers said. Lots of briefing going on here. A source close to Iowa Republican Joni Ernst's campaign said Ernst advisors are upset that a solid seat is now in play. Joni's campaign is pissed. They should not be in a competitive race, the source said. This is completely false, an Ernst campaign spokesperson said in a statement. Folks are energized about re-electing Joni Ernst. President Trump and the rest of the Republican ballot in Iowa. It was a comma, not a period. So folks are energized about electing all of them in Iowa this November. They're not. A Republican strategist close to Mitch McConnell told me that Republicans have Labor Day penciled in as the deadline for Trump to have turned things around. After that, he's on his own. That would be awfully late, of course, and I don't know whether any strategy after that is going to work. But there you have it. Usually, Labor Day, pointed to as the time at which the American public at large actually begins to pay some small amount of attention to what's going on in a presidential race. We'll see whether that holds here and what kind of effect it has. All right, let's see. I thought that was kind of interesting, especially the calling Tucker Carlson and asking, what should I do? When he was on Sean Hannity's show the other day, and Sean Hannity said, what do you want to do? He said, I don't know. I don't have any ideas. And now he's calling Tucker Carlson to find out what ideas he should have. Very, very sad. But we knew what kind of sway Fox News TV had over this guy. What can you do? Breaking, he's an idiot. So I'm surprising no one here. Let's see. New rounds of stories in the newspapers about dumb people who thought coronavirus would never reach them or was a hoax or you didn't have to worry about it, who actually then caught it and died. Would you like a new one? The Washington Post has the latest. Let's see. I think I caught wind of this one yesterday. Now it's written up in the Washington Post. Man who went to party warned people not to be an, quote, idiot like me a day before dying of COVID-19. Yeah, well, good advice, I guess, even if poorly timed, perhaps, and easy enough for you to have followed the whole time, but you didn't do it. Who are we talking about? I guess we're going to speak ill of the dead now. That's the whole point of this article, I guess. Thomas Macias. Macias? I don't know how he pronounces it. Macias. He was 51, here pictured with his great niece. He died of the coronavirus after attending a party without a mask, according to family. Of course, you're not supposed to diagnose people remotely from photographs, but there are some clear comorbidities here. And, perhaps that's the excuse that Republicans will give themselves for explaining his death. Sharing his regret on Facebook, Thomas Macias was focused on his loved ones. Because of my stupidity, I put my mom and sisters and my family's health in jeopardy. The California truck driver wrote in a post his family shared with the Washington Post, capital P Post, you see. And I guess he still really hadn't come to terms with everything. He put himself in jeopardy, but he doesn't include himself there. He doesn't want, he feels worse and probably a normal reaction that his mom and sisters and family may also be in trouble. But again, that was just sort of a scientific fact that was out there for your consideration early, and it clearly did sink in. You knew it was true just before you died, I don't think it was a realization you came to on your deathbed. You knew what you were doing. You did it anyway because you thought you weren't going to get it because you have a MAGA hat, maybe. I don't know what his politics are, but there's a high correlation between the two, as you know. Anyway, he had gone out to a party where no one wore masks, his niece, Danielle Lopez, said, only to learn afterward that someone knowingly attended with the novel coronavirus, apparently reasoning, erroneously, of course, that without symptoms, it couldn't do anyone any harm. I mean, why read the news or watch television news or listen to anyone or have a conversation with a human being that's been alive for the past 4 months? You could have found that out. But 51-year-old Macias was also at risk, made extra vulnerable by his diabetes and weight, Lopez said. The morning after that June 20th Facebook post, he called his mother saying he couldn't breathe. Yes, ironically enough. She told him to rush to the hospital. By 9 p.m., families say he had died. Perhaps, Lopez said, her uncle would not have gone out if their Southern California county had not been reopening. That's a good point. And if people hadn't thought the virus's threat was easing, and of course, I don't know how it was exactly in California. I doubt very much whether the state's information was, hey, there are no problems anymore. But the underlying message, of course, of reopening is never what's written in the press releases. Like, yes, we're easing restrictions, but wear masks, be careful. It's still out there. We just need to, for economic reasons, allow people to be able to do this. But for health reasons, we would ordinarily say no to this, and you should behave accordingly. Too much nuance. It doesn't work. That's why we have lockdowns. No trying to reason this out for yourself. That's where you're going to get yourself in trouble. Just stay home. That's the bottom line of it and the best way to keep you protected. But people want to reason this stuff out for themselves, and sometimes they land on things like, I'm alive now, and so is everyone at this party. So how could there be results that lead to death? Sure, fine. Good reasoning. Well, it was absolutely preventable, Lopez told the Post. Quite right. Family say Macias was diligent for months about minimizing his trips outside the home, knowing his health conditions made him vulnerable. But he was also a social creature, they said, calling his mom every day, call your friends then. Calling his mom every day and eager to see his loved ones. As were we all. He made friends wherever he went, just like his father. His uncle, Ricardo Macias, told the Post over Facebook Messenger. He didn't come in for an in-person interview. He told them over Facebook Messenger. You could hear him coming from a mile away when he was laughing, said Lopez, who was looking forward to moving 10 minutes away from our uncle next week. California, again, putting who at risk to make this move? Whatever. California was also starting to emerge from shutdown when Macias would have been weighing attendance at the party. Macias said he went out a couple of weeks before his June 20th Facebook post. Riverside County, where he lived in Lake Elsinore, was approved late in May to enter Phase 2 of California's reopening process, which meant people could head back to malls and dine at restaurants. Gyms, nail salons, and more followed in June. The coronavirus situation in Riverside, however, was worsening that month. So, like so many states. Look, it's on the calendar. I penciled it in. Yeah, it's supposed to pencil it in so you can erase it if necessary. Well, okay, I actually carved it in stone. I said we were reopening into Phase 2. And at all the press conferences, of course, all the officials are always saying, well, we're only going forward if we meet this, and this metric. You haven't met any of them. But the anticipation is killing me. We're going to open anyway. Happens everywhere. Even California. So where were we here? The coronavirus situation in Riverside was worsening that month. On June 17th, the Desert Sun reported the county went on a state watch list after cases increased and hospitalizations rose 19% in 3 days. Riverside is among the 19 counties covering more than 70% of California's population that Governor Gavin Newsom announced this week would have to shut a large swath of businesses back down as the state shatters its records for new known coronavirus cases reported each day. Even before Macias's death, Lopez said, we thought that it was a mistake opening so soon. There's still no vaccine, and there's still nothing to fight against this. We should not have opened to begin with, she said. Well, there is no vaccine, but there are masks, and he knew that, and he said, party's more fun. It's not clear how many people were at the party Macias attended in Lake Elsinore, where he lived about an hour's drive southeast of Los Angeles. Lopez said her family heard from Macias that a friend who also attended later reached out to say everyone should get tested because that person went despite having a coronavirus diagnosis. At the very least, Lopez said, the friend should have worn a mask. A precaution, the precaution that California mandated 2 days before Macias's Facebook post and that had been embraced by leaders across the political spectrum. Now finally has it, really. Lopez said her uncle had previously worn a mask but seemed to think it was, quote, not necessary anymore, especially among friends, which is incredibly stupid. She knows people are still resistant to masks, and it frustrates her. I really don't understand, honestly, why people find it so difficult, Lopez said. Macias said he was tested for the virus June 15th and got a positive result 3 days later. Soon, he was broadcasting his mistake to hundreds of Facebook friends. This is no joke, he wrote to them. If you have to go out, wear a mask and practice social distancing. Don't be an idiot like me, he said. He finished with, hopefully, with God's help, I'll be able to survive this. Well, disappointment all around on that front. And again, this, semi-stupid sounding at this point, generic message. If you have to go out, wear a mask and practice social distancing. Well, if you have to go out, you're not practicing social distancing. But okay. And two, if you have to go out to a party, wear a mask, you don't have to go. Just don't. But it sucks not to. I know. What sucks now? Everything. You're dead. Asked to confirm Macias's cause of death, an official at the Riverside County Office of Vital Records told the Post that a 51-year-old man with his name recently died in the area due to COVID-19. They can't get too specific here. But I can't give you that information. But if you're looking for a guy named Macias who died recently, it was COVID-19 that did it. Okay, why not just whatever. His family is fundraising for the funeral on a GoFundMe page. Can you believe it? Where some donors say they have no connection to Macias beyond the shared pain of the coronavirus or the gratitude of reading his final warning to friends. I don't know Tommy or your family, but please take some comfort in knowing that his post will probably save lives, one person wrote as they made a $20 contribution. Lopez said masks and social distancing will be required July 10th at the Sun City service, where there will be no hugs and people will be asked to pay their respects quickly and then leave the room. Gathering nonetheless, of course. Okay. Just putting it out there that once again, people who are pretty sure that they've been following all the rules and pretty up to speed on what you have to do, apparently carrying away the message somehow that, oh, hey, all the precautions are out the window now and we don't have to do anything. It's one of many such stories, and we don't need to share them all, but I don't know. Good reminder. You probably don't need it, but maybe somebody in your family or your social circle does. Don't do it. It's not over. And honestly, a deathbed Facebook post isn't going to change my opinion of what you did here. But there you go. That's what people are scrambling for at the end. Oh, like President Trump. What do I do? What do I do? He turns to Tucker Carlson. They turn to Facebook. What do I do? What do I do? Nothing. You die from the virus when you're at that stage. And that's all there is to it. All right, let's see. Recommended reading for the weekend. This is apparently a very powerful piece and another in the series lately from both the Washington Post and the New York Times. This one from the Post, I think, making sort of multimedia presentations on large and complex stories. This one very interesting. I happened to see this one shared by Natasha Bertrand, but pointing, of course, to the piece in the Post about Clint Lawrence, one of the war criminals from the Afghanistan war, pardoned by President Trump recently, and the effect that his case had on the members of his platoon. It's really sort of interesting. And the excerpt that Natasha grabs onto here, soldiers who served under Clint Lawrence in Afghanistan see Trump's pardon as betrayal. And you had to imagine that they would see it this way. But if you had to take a quick guess, looking at the faces of the soldiers from that platoon who are interviewed here, you might guess that some of them were Trump supporters at some point. And maybe this would be enough to change their minds. I don't know. 14 of his men, the quote says, testified under oath against him. Not one of his former soldiers spoke in his defense. It took the jury of Army officers 3 hours to find him guilty. And remember, this is a war crime trial. And yet, boom, Trump saw on Fox News that it was all so unfair and went ahead and pardoned him, probably against any advice he might have actually received on it. But I think he might have bypassed the advisory stage. So the Washington Post has put this fantastic thing together. It looks like a relatively long read, just by the looks of the scrolling, although a lot of it is photo illustration. So, it might not be all that long to read through it, but it feels like a good weekend piece for you to take a look at. It looks like the headline that they're running under here is The Cursed Platoon. Wow. Clint Lawrence had been in charge of his platoon for only 3 days when he ordered his men to kill 3 Afghans stopped on a dirt road. Let's see, I gotta scroll a little bit to get to the rest of it. A second-degree murder conviction and a pardon followed. Today, Lawrence is hailed as a hero by President Trump. His troops have suffered a very different fate, and that fate illustrated in the multimedia elements here that are on the screen. Depression, this is, I'm sure, widely suffered by soldiers coming out of Afghanistan, but his platoon in particular, seeing, one, having to live through the trauma of what they were ordered to do, 2, speaking out, I'm sure at great personal risk, against him, so that he was convicted in his court-martial of second-degree murder, and then seeing him pardoned and celebrated as a hero while they crumbled under the PTSD that grew out of this. PTSD, one of the elements on here. But depression, a fatal car crash killed one of the members of the platoon later on his return from a shooting death to one of them, hospitalizations for many of them, cancer, drug abuse, arrests, mentally, alcoholism, listed here as well. Mentally, they've been falling apart, and at least one suicide among the platoon as well. They've really been terribly damaged by what happened here and what he did to both the Afghan people that he killed and to his platoon, forcing them to kill them. And now their lives are falling apart, and he's a big media star. It must be incredibly galling. But it looks like fantastic work here by Greg Jaffe to put this feature together. I recommend it to you for over the weekend. We'll turn our attention for our couple of hours to a few other items. I had nearly forgotten because I talked enough about it on Twitter yesterday. The biggest of the COVID-19 You're an Idiot stories, I guess, has got to be, by now you've likely heard the news, Herman Cain. You remember Herman Cain having run for president. Was it in 2012 that he ran and lost in the primary eventually to Mitt Romney? I think so. You remember him as background, Godfather's Pizza CEO, the 999 tax plan, or who knows what the hell the plan was for anymore. I don't even remember. I think it was his proposal that all bills, if he were president, all bills would have to be 3 pages or less, which probably should have turned us on to, just how simplistic some Republican candidates for president might actually be in the future, like the one we have now. But also, he had also had, significant business accomplishments aside from being CEO of a pizza company. That you remember that Trump was considering him for Federal Reserve position at some point, and he had already previously served on a regional Federal Reserve board. So, an accomplished guy, but still a Republican and then therefore still subject to stupid anti-magical, I guess I would say, thinking about coronavirus. People will say it's magical thinking, but the magic doesn't work, so I don't know what to call it exactly. But anyway, yeah, coronavirus. Why is that of interest? Because he is, one, a loudmouth anti-mask guy, and two, where did he get the coronavirus? Well, you never know for sure, but it's worth pointing out that about 10 days before they announced that he was hospitalized with COVID-19 complications, he had been in attendance at Trump's big Tulsa rally, taking pictures of himself, maskless, of course, along with other, what do they call them, black voices for Trump. It was very interesting. They had he tweeted around photos of himself and the other people who were there as members of this distinguished delegation of black voices for Trump. I just found it very interesting that it didn't strike them as odd that they had their own section at the rally, like the black voices for Trump. Oh, you must be sitting over here in this section. I'm sure they thought of themselves as VIPs more than anything else. But anyway, there you have it. He went to the rally and tweeted around all sorts of things, including, I think, 24 hours before he was hospitalized. On July 1st, he tweeted out masks that he was on his way to another event, that he was going to go to the Independence Day, Trump Independence Day celebration at Mount Rushmore, and the South Dakota governor, who's a Trumpy wacko, was saying, the headline here, South Dakota governor, we will not be social distancing at big Mount Rushmore Independence Day event. So they were, she was all too proud to be out there saying, well, we're not going to have masks and we're not going to socially distance at this thing because we don't believe in science. Herman Cain found that compelling enough to tweet the article out, along with his own comment, masks will not be mandatory for the event, which will be attended by President Trump. And then in capital letters, people are fed up. This was 5:44 p.m., July 1st, 2020. The subsequent tweet in his Twitter feed, pardon me, 1 p.m. on July 2nd, 2020, came from someone else who had gained access or was given access to his account, who sent out this message. We are sorry to announce that Herman Cain has tested positive for COVID-19 and is currently receiving treatment in an Atlanta area hospital. Please keep him and all who are battling this virus in your prayers. Let me just, you can do what you want with your prayers. I would advise you, don't bother. I mean, pray for people who are being careful. That I think would be maybe the better application. But, prayers, God, it's a weird thing. You can probably include everybody in your prayers. And it's probably the right thing to do so. But don't ask me. I'm no theologian. Well, they say, please keep him and all who are battling the virus. Battling, by which I would point out, having to live with the virus in general circulation and who are doing the right thing. Pray for them too. Our full statement appears below, updates to follow, and I guess we could check in for an update on his Twitter feed and see what's up. On Monday, June 29th, Herman Cain was informed that he had tested positive for COVID-19. By Wednesday, July 1st, Mr. Cain, had developed symptoms serious enough that he required hospitalization. He spent the past night in the hospital, and as of today, Thursday, July 2nd, that was yesterday, he is resting comfortably, I don't know about how comfortable, in an Atlanta area hospital. Mr. Cain did not require a respirator, and he is awake and alert. I guess they meant ventilator on that one. We'll see whether that's changed. There's no way of knowing for sure how or where Mr. Cain contracted the coronavirus, but we do know he's a fighter who has beaten stage 4 cancer. Great idea to go out without a mask. With God's help, why not? We are confident he will make a quick and complete recovery and will soon resume hosting the Herman Cain Show at hermancain.com and Herman Cain's America on Newsmax TV. Please join with us in praying for Mr. Cain and for everyone who has contracted the coronavirus, as well as their families. Let's also join in praying for people who haven't contracted it, not to contract it. Well, I don't know. There's not too much more I have to say about that one. There's also included in this piece on CNBC's site another of Cain's tweets, this one from the rally. Here's just a few of the hashtag Black Voices for Trump at tonight's rally. Having a fantastic time. Bunch of hashtags here. Again, no particular irony noted by taking pretty much all the prominent black people that they could find and putting them in one section together. They were there to hold signs as Black Voices for Trump and not at all segregated from the rest of the community for whatever reason you might think they might have been. But, okay, they found that super normal and regular. The rest of the article is about, in case you don't remember who Herman Cain is, here's some information on his background. And yes, it was at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City where he served between 1989 and 1996. That's no joke, but neither is coronavirus, and he treated it like it was one. So you are free to treat Herman Cain as a joke if you want to. All right, let's see. Another of our breaks coming up here. I thought that was very interesting and a very quick turnaround for him. So bad news. We'll see whether he recovers. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know whether I care how this comes out or not, which is pretty bad. And maybe I need to check in for some self-help to try and figure out how to deal with coronavirus when it strikes people who are purposefully idiotic. But I'm not feeling super sympathetic about things. And maybe that'll change over the weekend. I'll do some soul searching if I got time for it. We'll see. I might have to go to a party without a mask. All right. We'll be right back after a short 1-minute break. That'll give us a chance to try and pick a direction for the second half of the show. I have a feeling it's going to be largely the same direction. It's a pretty big news story, this coronavirus. We'll see. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Here's your update from the Herman Cain Twitter feed in case you were maybe you're trying to plan your weekend. Will I be praying for Herman Cain? Does he not need my prayers? Is he worth praying for? I don't know. You're going to have to resolve this all on your own. 36 minutes ago, it's not clear whether he's tweeting or whether someone else is tweeting for him, although they do differentiate in some of these tweets. But 36 minutes ago, just the news we need, says Herman Cain. Now let's keep it going. Is it news about his recovery from COVID-19? No, it's news about America's recovery from Global 19, which isn't happening. But he's linking to HermanCain.com, a very reliable source among Herman Cain fans. Herman Cain being the number one Herman Cain fan in the world, I think. Global manufacturing is rebounding nicely. So let's not put the kibosh on it again. In other words, don't close anymore. And pretty soon, if you are a fan of seeing the economy take things slowly and cautiously, you may be pleased to, you might have been pleased to speculate that the voice behind this piece might fall silent at some point in the future and not advocate for this. But as it turns out, no. It won't happen unless Dan Calabrese, whoever he is, who actually gets the byline on this piece at HermanCain.com. Maybe HermanCain.com is just an aggregator. But Dan Calabrese is the one who says that things are rebounding nicely. I don't know who that is. Here's some information. He's been an editor of HermanCain.com since 2012 and was the syndicator of Herman Cain's newspaper column from 2006 to 2012. He has written for a wide variety of publications, including HermanCain.com, I Love HermanCain.com, HermanCainRules.com. No, I'm just kidding, but it might as well be the case. Written for a wide variety of publications from the Detroit News and Human Events, we know where that comes from, to Transport Topics and Pet Age. I'm not going to disparage the guy's freelancing career. You're right for whoever pays you. But okay. Dan lives with his wife and son, as many people do, in Royal Oak, Michigan, where, some number you could look up on the internet live. Minus one or two probably that died from coronavirus along the way. All right. So he thinks the economy is bouncing back and everybody needs to get out there and work. That's what he had to say 39 minutes ago. Now, 4 hours ago, when he was awake at 6 a.m., because it's hard to sleep in hospitals, he wanted you to know this. You should be praying for his death, basically, in a roundabout manner of speaking. Okay, what he really tweeted was this news from HermanCain.com. He's very busy promoting what's over at HermanCain.com. Basically, long story short, it's Dan Calabrese again. What do you know? Do they have any other writers? I don't really know. Anyway, this is a pro-hydroxychloroquine story. So Herman Cain is probably in the hospital pestering his doctors for hydroxychloroquine, asking, did anyone wait for this study before trashing the drug? Hashtag coronavirus. Hospital study, this is Calabrese's headline here. Hospital study shows hydroxychloroquine significantly lowers death rate for COVID-19 patients. Aha! Unlike all the rest of the science, which said that it might actually increase it. And then they, I think, backed off and said, it might have no effect, but it's not helping. This one says, it is helping. I don't know which is more surprising here, says Dan. The result or the fact that the media are willing to report it? Oh, I thought he was going to say unwilling to report it, but they are willing to report it. I suspect we're only getting coverage in Detroit because it's a Detroit-based hospital that conducted the study and is reporting the findings. Henry Ford Health, always trust Henry Ford when it comes to anything, really, is huge around here, and if they make any sort of major announcement, the Detroit area media will have a hard time ignoring it. Then again, we're only seeing this story in the relatively conservative Detroit News, where he wrote, right? The liberal Detroit Free Press appears to have ignored it completely. If and when the Freep covers it, I'll gladly update the story or say so. Oh, boy. We've been told that this Trump-touted drug is not only worthless, it may actually be harmful and may increase deaths. That's contrary to lots of anecdotal indications, but we're told we must wait for scientific data. Well, we have some now. Okay, I'd be interested to see how well done it was, but, there are always some contrary results in scientific inquiry. The question is it the prevalent result? And I guess elsewhere, it's just not. Well, anyway, let's see. Is it significant? Study analyzed 2,500 plus patients hospitalized among the system's 6 hospitals between March 10th and May 2nd and found 13% of those treated with hydroxychloroquine died, while 26% of those who did not receive the drug died. I don't know what I would make of those results. Among all patients in the study, there was an overall in-hospital mortality rate of 18%. So let's see, 13% who were treated with the drug died, 18% overall in-hospital mortality. So lower than overall by 5 percentage points, whereas those who did not receive hydroxychloroquine died at a rate of 26%, which is 8% higher than the overall, although it's not clear whether overall in-hospital mortality rate was across all, hospitalizations or just coronavirus hospitalizations. But so 8 points one way, 5 points the other. It's starting to feel like that might have been noise, but 8 points is pretty significant. 5 with a study of 2,500 patients is, probably within the margin of error or near thereabouts. And maybe they're pointing at the death rate of non-hydroxychloroquine patients as being probably outside of the one standard deviation there, or the margin of error. Anyway, let's see. Globally, the mortality rate for hospitalized patients is between 10 and 30%. It's 58% among those in the intensive care unit or on a ventilator. The study, published by the International Society of Infectious Disease, found patients did not suffer heart-related side effects from the drug. That's good news. Patients with a median age of 64 were among those analyzed, with 51% men and 56% African American. Roughly 82% of the patients began receiving hydroxychloroquine within 24 hours and 91% within 48 hours, a factor Dr. Marcus Zervos identified as a potential key to the medication's success. May be true. Who knows? We'll see. And I don't know. We'll wait for more studies, I suppose. Did anyone wait for this study before trashing the drug? No, because you hadn't finished it yet. And did anyone wait for more studies before deciding that we should buy millions more tabs and sending them out with no hope of actually distributing them? Probably not that either. All right, so don't take your medical advice just yet from Herman Cain. Maybe we wait. I wonder if he's pestering his doctor for hydroxychloroquine. If he's not, then what does this publication of this study mean for us? So, all right, we'll see what happens. Let's see. Update on the Mary Trump situation. We had heard, I don't know if we shared, I don't think we shared on the air, that apparently a judge somewhere had responded positively to the Trump team's seeking a preliminary injunction, I guess, blocking the publication of her book. It turns out that when they asked some judges who knew what they were talking about in an appeal of the situation, they said, yeah, we can actually publish that book. So that's where we are right now. I happen to have Talking Points Memo's piece about it from the other day. Judge rules in favor of publisher in Mary Trump tell-all book debacle. Zoe Richards writing for TPM yesterday. The publisher of Mary Trump's tell-all book can go ahead for now with the publication plans following a ruling by a New York appellate judge on Wednesday, which reversed a lower court decision to pause the publication of a much-anticipated account by President Trump's niece. The book, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, according to court papers filed by publisher Simon & Schuster, said, and obtained by the New York Times, has allegedly already been printed and sold tens of thousands of copies. So it'd be tough to stop it at this point. It's also listed as a bestseller on Amazon. The account is anticipated to reveal how Mary Trump contributed to a report from the Times on Trump's family's tax schemes. So, very interesting. I guess it goes forward. That's good news. Good news for the protesters who showed up outside of the Trump National Golf Course in Sterling, Virginia last week with the very clever signs that said, I ordered Mary's book. It's got under his orange skin a little bit on his way into the golf course. I understand that Trump, by the way, has departed the White House via motorcade, I think. I saw earlier this morning. And they didn't bother telling the press pool where he was going, and I guess they're left to guess about that. I assume that he was on his way, I don't know, I guess maybe out for the weekend. I thought maybe he would try and get to his New Jersey golf course for part of the weekend since he was denied that last week. I don't know whether they're clearing the way for him to go or whether he's trying to get some golf in now before he takes off for the Independence Day stuff in Montana. Let's find out. Let's see. Mark Knoller happens to be tweeting this one. President Trump has departed the White House by motorcade. White House doesn't announce his destination in advance. We'll see whether the commenters are correct. The first one listed here says, I predict Walter Reed. And apparently people agree. Let's check in on Knoller's feed and see if... there's the answer. President Trump has arrived at his golf club in Sterling, Virginia. It's 84 degrees, heading to 96. By my count, it's his 82nd time at the club, one fewer than his club at West Palm Beach. He loves the stats. All right, so that keeps us up to date. Maybe the protesters got out there in time to make signs about about their reviews of Mary's book. Maybe it's already in their hands. Let's see. Yeah. So this will be the third outing at the Sterling Golf Course since finding out in the news, since finding out that the rest of us now knew about the Russian bounties being paid for our soldiers in Afghanistan. So he's super concerned about all these things. Let's see. Where are we here? Oh, this is an interesting piece. Why don't we share this one? Not yet much covered, I don't think, but we'll turn to foreignpolicy.com for this interesting report. White House directed hiring of conspiracy theorist over Pentagon objections. Can you imagine such a thing in this administration? The White House wants fired National Security Council aide Rich Higgins hired for a senior defense position. How did he get fired? Let's find out. Jack Detsch and Robbie Gramer reporting for Foreign Policy. The White House directed the Defense Department to hire a former National Security Council staffer fired for circulating a conspiratorial memo and known for Islamophobic tweets. People familiar with the matter told Foreign Policy. So not surprising that somebody caught out as a conspiracy theorist, wacko, and Islamophobe who was untenable to retain on a National Security Council, Trump is looking to bring back into the administration. The move is part of an aggressive push to staff the Pentagon with figures loyal to U.S. President Donald Trump and with connections to ousted former National Security Advisor and notorious international spy Michael Flynn. That has been met with resistance across the river because Michael Flynn is a spy. In late May, the White House Liaison Office instructed the Defense Department to hire Rich Higgins as a chief of staff to the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Anthony Tata has been, I guess that's the guy, has been selected for the Undersecretary role, but he has yet to have a Senate confirmation hearing. We'll see how that goes. Facing Pentagon pushback, the White House subsequently backed off, telling Pentagon officials not to hire Higgins until Tata is confirmed as the agency's top policy official, but to get his paperwork ready. The White House reached out again about Higgins this week. A U.S. official told Foreign Policy, asking why the Pentagon had not begun the hiring process for him. You told us not to. Could that be it? Higgins' selection comes amid purges in the Trump administration of moderate Republicans and the appointment of a closely linked circle of acolytes of Flynn into the Pentagon, as Defense Secretary Mark Esper has lost sway with the president, imagine that, and has seen his influence over personnel decisions increasingly overtaken by the White House. The people familiar with the decision said that the White House Presidential Personnel Office, led by Trump's former personal aide and body man, Johnny McEntee, was behind the move. Of course. The Washington Post first reported Higgins was under consideration for a role at the Pentagon. In May, another hawkish Trump advisor who was first brought into the National Security Council by Flynn, Ezra Cohen Watnick, I think we remember that name, quietly joined the Pentagon as a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for counter-narcotics and global threats. Cohen Watnick, like Higgins, was forced out of the NSC after Flynn's ouster and subsequent FBI indictment. Simone Ledeen, you'll recognize the last name, who has previously served at the Pentagon and Treasury and whose father co-wrote a 2016 book with Flynn, Michael Ledeen, right? Also recently joined the Defense Department as the agency's top Middle East policy official. Terrific. By the way, I think this story came to my notice when Empty Wheel tweeted about it, saying, yeah, you might also have noted that both of Simone Ledeen's parents are right-wing conspiracy theorist inner circle wackos. Barbara Ledeen, that's her mom. Michael Ledeen co-authored a book with Flynn. Barbara Ledeen in cahoots with, was it the three Barbaras? Barbara Olson, Barbara Ledeen, and what was the name of our stupid member of Congress briefly that we had here? Was the third of the three Barbara friends. I've already forgotten her name. Good. I'm glad. Wow, that's weird. I'm blanking on it. Maybe one of you out there knows it. But yeah, she was actually our member of Congress for, I don't know, maybe 2 terms, was it? So anyway, why can't I bring her name to mind? Should I look it up? Should I go check? Let's see. I'll see if I can figure it out. I don't know. Now I'm stuck on it. But Comstock, that was it. Barbara Comstock. Yes, okay. Thank you, Google. You filled it in before I had to finish on that one. But yeah, I think I should, it'll take me forever to dig up the old archived story about the three Barbaras. But anyway, suffice to say that they are packing now the Pentagon with Michael Flynn fans, which is probably about the worst thing you could do. Flynn, of course, fired from the Defense Intelligence Agency at the Pentagon before, which was our first indication of his status as a spy. Oh well. The rise of Flynn-linked appointments to senior defense positions has coincided with the departure of several high-profile Pentagon officials questioned over their loyalty to Trump, trying to solidify his control of the armed forces. Just sort of worrisome for those who are watching the March of Fascism. Last month, Catherine Wheelbarger, who had been, Barger perhaps, but anyway, had been performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. In other words, another one of those, you know what kind of officials, the acting! Yes, the acting officials. She resigned from her job days after the White House selected a new nominee for a top Pentagon intelligence job she had previously been tapped for. The impeachment inquiry into Trump over the White House's withholding of military aid to Ukraine also led to the February ouster of Pentagon Policy Chief John Rood, R-O-O-D, who questioned the move to withhold aid. How dare he? And the June resignation of the agency's acting comptroller, Elaine McCusker. I think you remember her name now that I mentioned it, who saw the administration scuttle her nomination for the permanent post after opposing the hold. It is natural that the White House would want to put some of its own thinking in these roles, said Mara Karlin, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense during the Obama administration and now the Director of Strategic Studies at the Johns Hopkins School, there's Johns Hopkins again, of Advanced International Studies. What is more anomalous, frankly, is the background and views of these individuals. Tata, I don't know, T-A-T-A. Anyway, that's the pick to take over Rood's old job as the Pentagon's top policy official, is already serving in the Pentagon as a senior advisor to Esper, Foreign Policy previously reported, a role he has used to acclimate to the national security portfolio as he awaits a Senate confirmation hearing. Under rules put forward by the Pentagon's General Counsel, nominees cannot undertake to hire, transfer, or terminate members of a potential future organization. The direction to hire Higgins raised concerns among some defense officials that Tata would appear to be presuming confirmation for the job if he had only been nominated, which he had only been nominated for. That's probably true. Tata, whatever his name is, retired from the military in 2009 after the Army concluded. He retired. Oh, really? Well, you had enough in the Army, have you? Well, he retired after the Army concluded that he forged a court order in an adultery case from a past marriage. Only forging court orders. He's a super respectful guy. I'm sure civilian control of the military will be no problem with this fellow. Yeah, well, now he's in the civilian ranks instead. In a series of tweets in 2018, he asserted conspiracy theories that a former CIA director was trying to have Trump assassinated, and he called former President Barack Obama a Muslim and terrorist leader. Facing mounting opposition in the Senate, Tata, I don't know, who cares, tried to walk back his comments in an apology letter to senior lawmakers last month obtained by Foreign Policy. In 2017, when Higgins was in the Strategic Planning Office at the NSC, he wrote a memo titled POTUS and Political Warfare. Interesting, political. That included sweeping and conspiratorial accusations of the political threats facing the president. Trump was facing public attacks because he posted an existential threat to cultural Marxist memes that dominate the prevailing cultural narrative. It doesn't even make, grammatical sense. Anyway, this is what Higgins wrote in his own stupid NSC memo, which was first published by Foreign Policy. Among those who posed a threat to the president were deep state actors, globalists, bankers, get it, Islamists, and establishment Republicans, according to Higgins. In the memo, he also accused the European Union, the United Nations, the OSCE, I don't think I know the acronym off the top of my head here, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the International Muslim Brotherhood, let's throw them in there too, why not, of spreading hate speech narratives, which he describes as escalations of cultural Marxist memes. Again, not really sure what you're talking about. Higgins, in contrast to Tata, has not disavowed the contents of the notorious 2017 memo and has since doubled down on them. That's linked. Where did he double down in them? In the Wall Street Journal. Very interesting. So we won't be able to see it. In his biography, he has one. Higgins says he was fired, quote, after warning of a deep state coup to remove the president. Oh my. Once again, another of the many, many people fired for telling the truth. In recent weeks, Higgins has reemerged as a peddler of conspiracy theories on Twitter, claiming that the Catholic Church and Democratic Party have been overrun by communists, appearing to refer to the QAnon theory as a psychological warfare program, and was that a good one or a bad one? I don't know. And retweeting followers who misleadingly connect the Black Lives Matter movement to the Islamic State. Sure. Totally belongs in Pentagon policymaking. His recent Twitter missives have attempted to label Trump's opponents and even former Trump administration officials as communists and Marxists. Wow. Get out of the 80s, man. 60s, really. Obama establishing himself as the head of the counter-state. Unprecedented, Higgins tweeted on June 3rd after Obama addressed the nation after the police killing of George Floyd. Buy guns and ammo. On the same day, Higgins also claimed that former Defense Secretary James Mattis had joined the administration through a transition staffer who had met with Chinese and Vietnamese communists in Beijing. Whatever, man. Higgins did not respond for a request for comment. The White House declined to comment. Pentagon did not respond to a request for comment. All the variations of that one in that little paragraph. Higgins, an Army veteran, had previously served as a career official in the Defense Department's Irregular Warfare Support Office during the George W. Bush and Obama administrations, according to his bio. The chief of staff job within the policy secretariat would give Higgins a powerful perch within the Pentagon that allows for significant outward-facing time with the White House and the National Security Council, where he was fired from. A former defense official, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that the job is usually held by a non-political appointee, drawing upon long-held institutional contacts within the Defense Department to shake loose stalled policy memos and control the flow of documents into the Undersecretary's office. He's very typical of this S show of an administration, the former official said. The best you can hope for is they don't do any damage. Well, that's not likely to be the outcome of this one, but I don't know. Once again, embedding wackos and conspiracy theorists in important positions. Par for the course, like he said. Absolutely the case. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the military, worth noting here, the Twitter report of Sung Min Kim, the White House reporter for the Washington Post, noting with a wow that Tammy Duckworth, Senator Duckworth, says she will block Senate approvals of 1,123 senior U.S. Armed Forces promotions until Secretary Esper confirms in writing that he did not and will not block the expected and deserved promotion of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman to full colonel. Yes, for those of you who don't know, those senior promotions are technically subject to approval by the Senate. And, well, you can do that sort of stuff. I will object to proceeding with all 1,123 senior armed forces promotions scheduled for Senate approval, which they usually do by unanimous consent. The military recommends it. We accept the recommendation. Well, nobody gets promoted, I guess, until Vindman gets the promotion that he deserves. Okay, very interesting. So add that to your mix. Another break coming up here, and we'll try and find our direction for our final segment. I've got some ideas what we might do with that, and get you prepared for the weekend. Let's see. Yes, definitely a couple of things we'll have to touch on in our last segment. That now taking shape. Let's start our music. Voila. And so we know. All right, let's see. Any quick hits we can throw in there before we head out here. No, there's the book stuff here. No, okay. Oh, yes, a few things here, but I guess nothing we can actually fit in the next 30 seconds or so. But anyway, lots of interesting things to share, including a listener submission that will just take a brief one at that. Just want to throw that in there into the coronavirus mix from asparagus zucchini, so stay tuned. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Networks Radio. I told you for sure that there was word out there about Tucker Carlson running for president. Here, a Politico piece that backs up that otherwise baseless assertion. Of course, the idea of his running for president equally baseless, but this is it from Politico. Tucker Carlson 2024? ? The GOP is buzzing. The Fox News host's ratings have gone gangbusters, whatever that might really mean, and many Republicans think he'd be a force in the Republican primary. And he might very well be, because they're very stupid people and they love TV personalities. Tucker Carlson's audience is booming, and so is chatter that the popular Fox host will parlay his TV perch into a run for president in 2024. Republican strategists, conservative commentators, and former Trump campaign and administration officials are buzzing about Carlson as the next generation leader of Donald Trump's movement, with many believing he would be an immediate frontrunner in a Republican primary. He's a talented communicator with a massive platform. I think if he runs, he'd be formidable, said Luke Thompson, a Republican strategist who worked for Jeb Bush's super PAC in 2016 and I guess needs work. While practically every Republican eyeing a 2024 presidential run is professing loyalty to Trump in person, Carlson has become perhaps the highest profile proponent of Trumpism, a blend of anti-immigrant nationalism, economic populism, and America First isolationism that he articulates unapologetically and with some snark, as what everyone wants in a president. At the same time, he's shown a rare willingness among Republicans to bluntly criticize Trump when he believes the president is straying from that ideology. In another twist, Carlson has established a friendship with Donald Trump Jr. According to a source familiar with their relationship, Trump Jr. has drawn his own share of presidential buzz. Trump Jr. probably counting on Carlson for being his press secretary. It'd be interesting to see whether this generates any problems for either of them. Anyway, do you really want to know the rest of it? I mean, that guy's a total dick, and I guess that makes him perfect for running for president. Okay, as a Republican. Anyway, you know, whatever. I don't know. I guess to the extent that he thinks he might try, if he flames out, that would be fun. I wouldn't mind seeing that. But who knows whether we'll be able to put any of this to rest at any point in the near future. But okay, whatever. There's really not much more time I want to spend on that one. Okay, where I did want to turn attention. Oh, let's see. Well, did we put any of these away in pocket for later? I'll just check one more time. No, all right, we'll store that one away. I mentioned to you that I had a submission from Asparagus Zucchini, who just has a quick question, really, but it comes on the coronavirus front. I thought I would pose it. Probably should have done it on a day when Greg was around, But we'll see. Maybe Greg's listening in and has got an answer. And he invites an answer from all of you. Just a good question. I think we could speculate on what the answer is from what we've heard. But let's roll it and see what he had to say.
All right, I have a question for anybody who might have the answer. That is, where does this 15-minute limit come from for social distancing? I'm not even sure what's totally meant by that, but I know that people who think that they're complying with COVID recommendations take that 15-minute and run with it, and I think that's killing people. And I think there's an analogy here that somebody made that they said, well, we can tell the public 15 minutes because we tell them 15 minutes for other things. We tell them there's 15 minutes time-weighted average for exposure to certain chemicals. And that's fine because you can get a certain amount of exposure to certain chemicals. They also have a ceiling limit for some of those. But the 15 minutes is based on a total amount that you're exposed to. And I have a little analogy in the field where I work, which is radiation protection. And in radiation protection, if you're exposed to an airborne radionuclide that's not particularly high dose, you can get a lot of those. You can go sample them and, you know what's out there. You can get exposed, be inhaling particles for an hour and, depending on the concentration, which can be a known thing, it might not be very much. But that's where, you can probably do 15 minutes in a power plant outage when they know what the exposure rates are to the air in the containment building or something. Now, here's another radionuclide, though. If you get these actinides, which are like americium, plutonium, you can get one particle and you hit your dose limit. Now, it's not going to kill you. I mean, don't get crazy about it. But it's a lot of dose in one particle. And I think that's what's going on with this COVID thing. How much do you need? How many droplets do you need to be exposed to? Maybe one. So that's all I have to say about that. Is that crazy? I hope somebody has an answer. Thanks.
All right. Well, I don't know whether anybody has a definitive answer on that. And it may just be nothing more than an estimate. That's true about, I recall reading some writing somewhere along the line about the viral load that you needed to take on in order to actually have an infection. I mean, I guess one extraordinarily lucky virus alone making it through all defenses against all odds might in fact infect you. But I gather that has something more to do with the chaos theory that Greg has referred to. There's no single answer for everyone about viral load that, in terms of how much does it take to get an infection. But I guess they have some idea about what it takes on average. And my understanding is, but again, it's never really been made entirely clear, that I guess that sort of 15-minute window in close personal contact is enough to deliver the amount of viral load that on average can lead to infection. I mean, you could certainly make that assumption, but I don't know if there's any real actual data science behind it in terms of how much virus is really being transferred, because, different people will shed virus at different rates, et cetera, et cetera. I am sure that people who are shedding virus at higher rates, and as I understood it, that was, I think that was the asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic people were actually shedding virus at a higher rate than symptomatic people were, though it's not entirely clear whether that's because they're less in circulation, because once they get symptomatic, they stay home, or whether there really is, if you have a known infected pre-symptomatic person and a easier to find known infected symptomatic person, and put them in a room and just actually measure what's coming off of them, that they have some real numbers on that or what. But I mean, 15 minutes has got to be an approximation that some people will be able to infect you in 5 minutes. Some people will be able to infect you in 1 minute. Some people will be able to, not be able to do it in half an hour. But they had to give you an answer. They couldn't simply say, I guess, no exposure to anyone ever. And if you even get in there for a second, you're doomed and you got to self-quarantine. We're talking about, a situation where there weren't enough tests to go around in the first place, and there certainly isn't enough room to isolate people in hospitals or even in any sort of a non-hospital isolation ward type situation. In this country, we didn't even explore it. Other countries, rented out entire hotels and just put people up in there. That's what it would take to suppress the actual spread of the virus. But, we were never going to try and do something like that. Screw that. But yeah, I mean, I imagine it's just a guess and nothing more. It's not, I assume, as close to scientific in the sense that there's real hard data on it as you would have for handling nuclear materials. But again, that too would just be an average, right? I assume that some people will luck out and not sustain as much damage from exposure to the same level of nuclear materials that other people, on average, and the average might be pretty steady because it's pretty hard to avoid damage from really serious radioactive materials. But I guess, again, chaos theory, some people just luck out for whatever reason, even though the same exposure would almost certainly kill someone else. It didn't kill this person, damaged them terribly, but it didn't kill them. And there may be any number of reasons for it. But this is a novel coronavirus, of course, and so we just don't know entirely. And I guess I'm sure it's best practice, and especially for medical professionals. You can't tell them, any amount of contact with an infected person will infect you, even if you're wearing, protective gear, or maybe protective gear is the only barrier that can stop it. But whatever, I don't think, just statistically, that you can say, zero exposure, anything over zero will do it. I imagine they're just guessing and giving people some sort of thing to go on. Otherwise, everybody will just be panicking and assuming that they have COVID-19 and overwhelming the testing facilities and overwhelming the treatment facilities and overwhelming any quarantine facilities that we might have established but didn't. And everything shuts down. Probably just a guess. Anybody have anything better than that? I don't. Let's see. We'll check the Twitter feed and see whether anybody else does. Not so far. But if you do, let us know. Or maybe tape your own response if you want to send one in and email it to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and we'll include it in the show. And it's always worth giving me a couple minutes break along the way. What did I do with that break? Well, I started poking around at all the other things that we have in store for you in Pocket. Here's a story we got to get to. I saw yesterday a little bit of confusion coming out of the AP headline, which and their tweet about their headline. The tweet read, "Breaking: the Supreme Court denies Congress access to secret grand jury testimony from special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation through the November election." A little bit of minor controversy over what did that actually mean and what did their tweet say, and was it a correct interpretation of what had happened here. Here's the AP News write-up of it. "Justices keep hold on secret Russia investigation material," by Mark Sherman. But essentially what at bottom here, what's going on here is Congress was suing over their asserted right to access, and they correctly have in fact got that right, to access the grand jury material that had been kept secret by virtue of it being grand jury material from the Mueller report. But they asserted that they wanted to see it, needed to see it in order to determine whether any impeachable offenses had occurred. And they have ordinarily a pretty strong claim to getting it. What the justices did here is they gamed things. They're not, at the moment, they may very well be eventually willing to say this, but at the moment, they're unwilling to say whether or not they agree that Congress has got that right. They're not saying they don't. They're just saying, we're not going to tell you until after the election. We're putting the case off. We're not going to consider it until next session, which means the election intervenes, which means, I think, probably for Chief Justice Roberts, he's hoping that the election will moot the whole thing. That is, that Trump's loss at the polls will make it a moot point. It really doesn't make it a moot point, but they're hoping that it'll make it politically moot. We no longer have to have access to this grand jury information because we're no longer interested in impeaching Donald Trump because he's out of office. I'll remind you one more time, though, that you can, and I would say should, impeach officials even after they've left office when they've committed impeachable offenses. Impeachable offenses are impeachable offenses. He should be on the record as having been impeached for them, period, no matter what the result is. So, to me, it doesn't moot the issue. Not sure that Congress would actually argue that afterwards. But equally dangerous, of course, and to be kept in mind is the possibility that somehow Trump claims to have pulled off success in this election and that he should, in fact, remain. We should continue to consider him president of the United States, which was always highly questionable in my view. But if he were to, quote unquote, win the election, then I guess the court would have to decide something, and they may, who knows which direction they'll go with this. But the fact that they waited and the fact that they would have, I think, helped install him back in the presidency by avoiding the revelation of some material that's of distinct interest to the voting public, I think is a trick they're pulling on people that, you have no choice but to stand for it. That's the system we've got. So as long as they're non-political and just calling balls and strikes, whatever. Okay, the story reads this way. The Supreme Court is denying Congress access to secret grand jury testimony from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation through the November election. Again, they're not explicitly denying it to them. They're just simply saying, we're not going to decide until after the November election, which effectively denies it to them, yes. So it's not wrong. If you really want to parse it, you don't have to. We just did it for you. There you go. The justices agreed on Thursday to hear the Trump administration's appeal of a lower court order for the material to be turned over to the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. That is to say, again, they're appealing a lower court order saying, yes, Congress has the right to this material. And they're just saying, we won't decide that appeal until later, which is amazing. The High Court's action will keep the documents out of congressional hands at least until the case is resolved, which is not likely to happen before 2021. Arguments themselves might not even take place before Americans decide whether to give President Donald Trump a second term. The delay is a victory for Trump, who is also mounting a Supreme Court fight against congressional efforts to obtain his banking and other financial records. Those cases are expected to be decided in the coming days or weeks. The court's action could also mean the justices never have to reach a definitive ruling in a sensitive dispute between the executive and legislative branches of government if Trump loses his re-election or Republicans regain control of the House next year. It's hard to imagine an administration of Democrat Joe Biden objecting to turning over the Mueller documents or House Republicans continuing to press for them. The House wants previously undisclosed details from the investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election. Representative Jerry Nadler, chair of the House Judiciary Committee, called the court's decision disappointing. Unfortunately, President Trump and Attorney General William Barr are continuing to try to run out the clock on any and all accountability. While I am confident their legal arguments will fail, it is now all the more important for the American people to hold the president accountable at the ballot box in November, Nadler said in a statement. You could, of course, hold them accountable in your committee, but there's an election coming soon, and we don't do things like that. The Federal Appeals Court in Washington ruled in March that the documents should be turned over because the House Judiciary Committee's need for the material in its investigation of Trump outweighed the Justice Department's interests in keeping the testimony secret. Mueller's 448-page report issued in April of 2019, just to give you an idea of how, where we are, issued in April of 2019. We are a year plus into this thing, and Congress still doesn't know what the F he had to say. And we're suing to find out, and it's going to take another half a year to even find out whether the court is going to let them see the material. It's going to take 2 years for the court to decide whether or not Congress actually has the right to do this sort of thing, which basically means 2 years is an entire Congress, right? So no sitting Congress will ever actually have the right to dislodge materials under this procedure that they feel are necessary to a presidential impeachment inquiry. Congress's powers, you know the story. So long as they've had to resort to courts to resolve these disputes, the Republican presidents who play this run out the clock game get away with whatever they want. We saw it happen in the George W. Bush administration. It was obvious it was going to happen in this administration too. They told you they were going to do it this way. All right. The committee was able to persuasively argue that it needed access to the underlying grand jury material to make its own determinations about the president's actions, the court said. This was the lower court. The materials initially were sought last summer, but by the time the appeals court ruled in March, Trump had been impeached by the House and acquitted by the Senate. The Justice Department said in its Supreme Court filings that the court's action was needed in part because the House hasn't given any indication it urgently needs those materials for any ongoing impeachment investigation. The House had opposed the delay on the grounds that its investigation of Trump was continuing and that time is of the essence because of the approaching election. The current session of the House will end on January 3rd, and lawmakers elected in November will take their seats. Democrats have suggested that the grand jury materials could reveal new misconduct that could potentially form the basis of new articles of impeachment. But now the chairman of the Judiciary Committee says, election instead, I guess. But such a course would have been unlikely so close to the 2020 election, even if the court had allowed the material to be turned over immediately. They somehow feel that impeaching the president again, whether over old material or new, is somehow disadvantageous to them politically. I don't know if I understand that or agree. The House impeached Trump for his efforts to get Ukraine to announce an investigation of Biden, but the Republican-controlled Senate acquitted the president in February. It's also unclear how many new or incendiary revelations might be contained in the grand jury transcripts. Mueller's report, though redacted in parts, revealed more than a year ago significant information about the president's effort to choke off the investigation and raise substantial questions about whether he had committed obstruction of justice. Besides, many of the witnesses closest to Trump appeared voluntarily before Mueller's team of prosecutors, and the Justice Department in recent months had released written, albeit redacted, summaries of those interviews. That means the public already has insight into the accounts of key Trump associates, including son-in-law Jared Kushner and advisors like Steve Bannon and Hope Hicks. Many would dispute that, but there you have it. So we got to wait once again because balls and strikes, law and order, et cetera, et cetera. This is just never really going to work itself out in favor of Congress unless they, maybe even if they do assert themselves through the forgotten tools of inherent contempt. That wouldn't do anything by way of dislodging the grand jury material, I don't think. But just sort of reinforcing the point that the courts are always going to move too slowly to enable a congressional investigation to get its job done. All right, let's see. Did I somehow close Pocket here? We didn't want to do that. Let's get back to it and pull out a few other stories to share before closing things out. Oh, I had scrolled down to something that I thought might be a fitting inclusion here, and now we're going to have to keep searching for it. All right, just a second here. No, that wasn't it. That about the book. Okay. Yeah, all right. Another weird item that crossed my path here. Just throw it out because it's the weekend. You never know what's going to blow up over the weekend. A Politico piece from the other day. Publisher's wife played undisclosed role for Melania Trump. The owner of one of our favorite publications to disparage, the owner of The Hill, helped arrange his wife's unpaid advisory role in the First Lady's office. Have you ever had, as many of you do, doubts about The Hill and where their allegiances lie? I like their coverage on Twitter just because they do a good job illustrating their pieces with photos so that they make it attention-getting and gives us an opportunity to riff even on the bad coverage that they provide over at The Hill. But interesting little bit here. I thought I'd add this to the mix. Daniel Lipman and Tina Nguyen having reported this one. The owner of the news outlet that publishes the columns at the center of the Ukraine, published the columns at the center of the Ukraine scandal. Remember that whole incident? Helped secure an unpaid White House position for his wife, a fact the publication did not disclose to readers. Jimmy Finkelstein, that's his real name, a wealthy Manhattanite who owns The Hill, was sufficiently involved that he personally discussed his wife's arrangement with the White House lawyers. His wife, former CNN producer Pamela Gross, is a longtime friend of Melania Trump, and she volunteered to help the new First Lady find her footing in the East Wing. Now, here's your footing. It's the floor. Done. Hope we can get contract soon, as Pamela looks forward to serving the country and the First Lady. It says serving, and then it has the sick in there. Like, is that a mistake? Looks forward. I see. The two is missing. Looks forward, serving the country and the First Lady. Finkelstein emailed Stefan Passantino, the White House's top ethics lawyer at the time. I don't think we had his name cross our desk, which means maybe he did a relatively decent job staying out of the news anyway. That back on July 5th, 2017. The White House never announced Gross's hiring, even though she spent around 6 months advising the First Lady. I guess they figured she's unpaid, so we don't have to say anything. I mean, you do, but they decided you didn't. Gross primarily worked from New York. Glad she was unpaid. But her arrangement had some trappings of White House employment. She filled out a security clearance questionnaire and was granted a White House email and cell phone and a temporary access badge for use when she was in Washington. So some fun perks. Many a White House has deployed the president's spouse to soften her husband's hard edges, though Melania, a reticent figure by the standards of recent First Ladies, has shied away from the role's more political aspects. Her primary initiative is Be Best. Remember that dumb thing? A program aimed at helping children develop healthy habits that developed out of Gross's work. Interesting. So not even Melania's idea. Not that I thought it was. Gross's unpaid arrangement was not disclosed in several dozen articles that The Hill published about the First Lady while Gross was advising her from August 2017 through February of 2018. Not very long. Nor were more than a select few Hill employees informed that their boss's wife was an East Wing advisor. The Hill covers Washington and politics, as you know, including frequent coverage of Trump and the White House. The publication late last year endured fierce criticism for a series of investigative articles on Ukraine by journalist John Solomon that figured prominently in the president's attacks on former Vice President Joe Biden. A months-long internal review of Solomon's work concluded he had failed to identify important details about his sources and faulted the outlet for blurring the line between opinion and reporting in his columns. Solomon has stood by his work. Not that he should have. When reached for comment, Finkelstein disputed the idea that his wife's work for the White House posed any conflict of interest. Pamela was proud to help the First Lady serve our country and the nation's children in this way. For Pamela, this was not simply a very worthwhile effort. It was a deeply meaningful on a personal level. As the daughter of, this is garbage, but so we throw out this one. As a daughter of a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor sent to the Auschwitz death camp as a child, she felt that joining the First Lady and helping children here and around the globe was tremendously humbling and personally rewarding. What a superfluous reference that was. It's okay not to disclose this because it was for children, and she's a child, sort of a Holocaust survivor who was sent to Auschwitz as a child but survived. So something children, and please, won't someone think of the children? Okay. Well, very interesting. We can't conclude the entirety of the article here. She doesn't appear to have done anything particularly important, and she wasn't cashing in on the job, but annoying to find out nonetheless afterwards that the Hill just really left and right feels that it's not necessary to reveal any of their potential conflicts of interest, which is a problem all by itself. All right, time to hand over the microphone now to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Maybe he'll have some more additions to your weekend reading and weekend thinking. I am positive of it. And he'll get some of the things that we missed along the way, and maybe I can pick out one or two of the best.
From Daily Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about we hop straight down to the International Chef's Table section, where the popular protest slogan, "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times," is now illegal under China's new security law, and Malaysia is the first country to suspend Pakistani pilots after a massive license fraud scandal was revealed in Karachi.